Great. Okay, now I'll go back to sharing. Sweet. Okay, well, we appreciate you all being here. Like we said, we are really excited. This is our second Parenting in a Pandemic webinar. And the topic for tonight is teen anxiety. And this is actually part one of a two-part series. So the second part, we'll just give you a nice taster today and start diving into it. But next month in November, stay tuned for postings on Parent Square or the SBUSD parent Facebook page or however else you get your information, because the dates and the information for next month's Teen Anxiety Part 2 webinar will be posted there. But yeah, we thank you for being here. Okay, so before we kind of dive in, we wanted to go over some housekeeping rules. So all attendees will be permanently muted throughout this presentation. So yeah, if you want to communicate with us, please use the chat feature. Sorry that we put you on mute. We just didn't want to have any technical difficulties or interruptions. And just so you know, this meeting is being recorded. So please feel free to have your video on or off, whatever you feel comfortable with. Of course, we'd love to see your face and kind of have that bit of engagement and feel at least a little bit closer to like if we were in person, but do whatever you feel comfortable with, video on or off. And like I mentioned, the chat feature, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to use the chat feature down below. And you can send your questions directly to any of us facilitators. We'll introduce ourselves in a minute. And we will be trying to use the chat feature to communicate with you all throughout. Since I, Devin, am sharing the screen, it's a little bit more challenging for me to navigate the chat feature. So maybe chat Jessica, Raquel, or Kara, if possible. But yeah, go ahead and please do communicate with us. And depending on the question, we may answer in live time, like at that point in the slide, or we might wait until the question and answer time, which we will have at the end of the webinar tonight. Even if you have any like, oh, that's cool, whoa, that's helpful information, or you guys are so funny, this is awesome. we'd love having that engagement from you all. And just a disclaimer, this webinar is for informational and educational purposes only. So your participation in this webinar is not intended to be a substitute for professional, psychological, psychiatric, or medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. So who are we? We, the four of us, we make up a part of the Family Service Agency's school-based counseling team here in Santa Barbara. And we are each located at different school sites. So all of us will go ahead and introduce ourselves.
Evan. So my name is Raquel Del Carmo, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. And I am at Goleta Valley Junior High. Thank you again for being here with us tonight.
Hi, thanks everyone for being here today. I'm happy to see all your faces. My name is Jessica Zacharias, and I'm an associate marriage and family therapist, and I'm at Santa Barbara High School.
Hey everybody, my name is Devin Haley Nelson. I am a candidate for my master's in social work right now, so I'm also a student, and I am located at La Cumbre Junior High School.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for spending some time with us this evening. My name is Kara Peterson. I am a marriage and family therapist trainee. Just like Devin, I'm still in school as well, and I'm based at San Marcos High School.
All right, so why are we here today? So the purpose of this webinar that we put together today for you guys, we have three main goals. The first one is to explain how unmet human needs contribute to anxiety. As humans, we all have needs, different types of needs, and we'll be looking at that in a little bit here into depth. And especially right now with the pandemic, there's a lot of human needs that are not being met. So we'll give a little better explanation about that in a little while. Also, our second goal tonight is to define anxiety and help you learn how to recognize it in your teen. So this is also something we'll be doing in part 2 of this webinar, and we'll be going into depth, a little bit more depth then. And the third goal of us being here tonight is to introduce strategies and resources to help your teen. Again, we'll be going into more depth in our part 2 of this teen anxiety webinar. Okay, so as Devin said already, this is our second webinar in the Parenting in a Pandemic series. And last month, we did a webinar on self-care. So this is just, as you can see here on this slide, just a quick recap of what we talked about last month. So that was our subtopic, was self-care. So in an attempt to normalize and validate everyone's experience, we looked at how the coronavirus is triggering mental health issues due to factors such as feelings of overwhelmed, financial insecurity, disruption of the routine, social isolation, fear, increase in depression and anxiety, increase in family conflicts, grieving over surrounding expectations, maybe things that people were planning on doing, like trips or weddings or ceremonies that they could not do. So there was a grief around that. And as you can see here at the bottom of this slide, one of us will put that in the chat as well. Just a link, if you have not checked out the, Jessica just put it in the chat for us. Thanks, Jessica. So if you have not checked it out and you are interested, we had a wonderful webinar with lots of ideas on how to engage in more self-care for yourself. You can use these 2 links directly, access the video through the FSA homepage, or also it's posted on YouTube, as you can see right there, and I was posted in a chat in case you want to check it out for yourself. So we also talked about self-care as a means to regulate emotions that benefit mental health. So again, a definition for self-care would be a practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's own health. So again, self-care is a very important piece in helping someone regulate their emotions and in maintaining strong mental health. So we discussed also point number 3, proactive versus reactive self-care. So again, we encourage everyone to work toward being proactive regarding their self-care practices so that, for instance, in times of crises, those practices would likely kick in faster because it's something you've practiced, you're used to doing. In a time of need, you would kind of like know what to do, and you're kind of used to having some way to cope with what you're feeling. So we also talked about 5 main areas of self-care and that someone should pay attention to, and they are social, physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional. So again, it's important to check in with yourself, because it might be that you are doing really well in one area of self-care. Say, for instance, you are engaging in a lot of physical activity, which is wonderful. So you're engaging in something that's good for your body, but it's important to look at the other areas too, because it might be that another area needs a little bit more focus on. Like, it might be that you could use a little bit more social self-care, or mental, spiritual, or emotional. So it's important to compartmentalize them and separate so that you can kind of know what to focus on. So we also talked about we also talked about mindfulness. We did deep breathing exercises, grounding practices as a means, and we provided also various resources in the community. We'll provide more today, but feel free to send us a chat or email later. And if you need any other resources, we'll be going over resources at the end. So when we were putting together this series, we decided to start with self-care. And that was the reason for that. We wanted to encourage everyone to practice self-care so that they can be in a better position to support others in their life, especially with the pandemic and everything that we are dealing with. So there's a little quote that we wanted to share tonight with you guys. And it's pretty simple, but I think it's very deep at the same time. It says, "Always fill your own cup first and allow the world to benefit from the overflow." So again, might sound cliche, but there's a lot of truth to it. So in an effort to start tonight's discussion around anxiety, which can bring a lot of anxiety, we wanted to start with some self-care. Going along with what we did in our first webinar. We're just gonna take a minute to breathe and check in with ourselves as we begin and to see how we're doing. So all we're gonna do, we're gonna play this simple, quick video here. It's only about a minute, and you can just follow the prompts with us as we do this short practice.
Hi, and welcome to Headspace. So no matter what's going on in your life right now, no matter how many thoughts are racing around your mind, no matter how the body's feeling, just take a moment to sit down and take a big deep breath, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. As you breathe in, a sense of taking in fresh air, the lungs expanding. As you breathe out, a sense of letting go of any stress in the body, in the mind, just feeling the muscles soften and relax. And close your eyes if you'd like to. One more, breathing deeply in through the nose and out through the mouth. And just take a moment to pause. Allow the thoughts to come and go. And then just gently opening the eyes again.
It's amazing what 1 minute can do, huh? All right, so we're gonna jump into it. So as Raquel was mentioning, we all have basic human needs, right? And this is called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's a psychological theory that identifies and categorizes different basic human needs. And so the whole theory says that you start at the bottom and you kind of work your way up. So you can see the basic needs, the bottom two there, the psychological needs, and then self-fulfillment needs. So as I read these, kind of think about and reflect for yourself which needs may not be being met right now, and also for your teens, which ones might not be met. And what we find is that when our needs aren't met, typically anxiety tends to kind of settle in, because what does anxiety tell us to do? It tells us to, it motivates us, right, to change our behavior, to fix the problem, to activate ourselves. That's why our body feels so activated when we experience anxiety. So I'm just kind of going to walk through each of these, starting with the bottom, the physiological needs. So this is food, water, warmth, rest, just kind of a basic health, right? And right at the get-go with COVID-19, we have a real threat to our health, which can absolutely prompt some anxiety, whether we really realize it or not, right? After that, we have safety needs and security needs. So this can look like having housing security, financial security, occupational security, and maybe for your team, security in school. Where am I going to be? Is it remote? Is it not? What's going on? As well as, do you feel safe in your home? Is it a safe place to be at home or in your neighborhood? Following that is belongingness and love needs. So we are absolutely wired for connection with one another. And in a time like now where we are told to socially distance, that makes connection even more hard, right? So does your teen have someone that they can connect with on a regular basis about not just superficial things, about something that they feel emotionally supported by at least one person in their life? Or do they have a sense of community? Are they part of a club? Or do they go to church? Is there something that makes them feel like they belong? And then the next one would be esteem needs. So this is kind of like prestige needs, but it's kind of the need to feel like you have achieved something and that you're capable, that you have self-efficacy, but it's also the need to have recognition from others about those achievements and about your capabilities and your, and your skill sets. And then we've got self-actualization. And so this is hard to reach even without a pandemic and all the changes we have right now. So have some grace for ourselves, for our teens, that we're not aiming to be there, as the arrow connotes there. We're not there. Maybe some are, but in general, I think most of us are kind of working from the bottom of the pyramid, right? And our teens too. And so self-actualization is really about just fulfilling your unique potential. If you have hobbies, you know, getting really good at those hobbies, getting the most out of your life. Some people call this like the enlightenment stage. And I think that's it for that slide. Yeah.
Thank you, Jessica, for highlighting those needs and how our current situation with the pandemic is affecting them. When we look at the needs and the needs that are not being met and how that can manifest in us as stress and anxiety, it's important to notice some differences between stress and anxiety, though they can both have similar symptoms. There are some differences between the two. Stress is much more of an external experience. It's a reaction to a threat, such as a deadline or maybe an argument, and this can cause feelings and sensations in the body that are uncomfortable. However, this usually resolves when the external stressor is resolved as well. With anxiety, it presents much more as an internal experience. It's a much more persistent feeling, can be categorized as dread, and oftentimes there is no obvious threat or catalyst. Anxiety can be much more long-term and lingering, and it does not resolve as easily. Anxiety can also escalate into a disorder when we start to notice that these feelings of stress become stronger, grow into anxiety, and then it's interfering with our ability to function and enjoy our daily life. Practicing self-care, which we talked about in our previous webinar, is an excellent way to cope with the stress externally and manage it and prevent it from escalating into a more significant anxiety issue or disorder. Can hit the next slide, Devin. Thank you. So a little bit more about some of the differentiations between everyday anxiety and more advanced disordered anxiety. Anxiety and stress are a normal and natural part of our human life, and it happens to everyone. Some examples of everyday anxiety: worrying about paying bills, having a job, romantic relationships, even, you know, friendships. Relationships can also be a source of joy and stress. Other important life events as well. Embarrassment or self-consciousness in an uncomfortable situation can be stress-provoking and a type of everyday anxiety, such as when your cat jumps into your screen on a live webinar. Nerves or sweating is also an indication that you're experiencing some stress. Again, a very normal, natural response to a stressful external stressor. A realistic fear or danger of dangerous objects or places. Again, sometimes anxiety and stress is helpful when we are in a situation that could be dangerous, and that stress allows us to respond appropriately to that danger. However, when we're in a situation where there isn't danger and we're feeling that stress, that's when it's becoming more of a disorder or unhelpful form of anxiety. And then again, when we experience traumatic events, you know, experiencing sadness, difficulty sleeping, or anxiety post events that are traumatic, natural and normal responses. Here are some signs that anxiety has developed into something a little more serious and maybe causing some more issues in your life. And again, we'll go more in depth in our part 2 of this webinar into disorders and more serious forms of anxiety, but just a brief overview of some of those. Constant and unsubstantiated worry. So again, that persistent feeling of anxiety without any real obvious stressor. Avoidant behaviors is also another red flag that your anxiety is taking over more and preventing you from doing things that you would normally enjoy doing. So watching out for avoiding things that you used to really enjoy doing. Panic attacks are another symptom of anxiety disorders, especially out of the blue panic attacks when there isn't, again, that external stressor. And then a persistent fear of having another panic attack. Again, the irrational fear is another sign. And reoccurring nightmares or flashbacks or emotional numbing. And these symptoms can persist months and even years after a traumatic event. So those are some more of the disordered types of anxiety that we'll delve into deeper in our next webinar. And then I believe we will have a video here just to give you some more illustrations of how anxiety manifests and also how it can look in your teens.
You know what anxiety feels like. We all do. Everyone experiences anxiety in some way or another. It's something that connects all of us together. Why we feel anxiety and what it really is, that may surprise you. Without anxiety, we'd all be in serious trouble. As soon as your brain senses you're in danger, a little piece of it, called the amygdala, kicks in. It gets your body ready to react. That could mean fight, run away, or shut down. It's called the fight, flight, or freeze response. This reaction goes back millions of years to our distant animal ancestors. Animals whose amygdalae were more sensitive to danger were more likely to stay alive and off the menu. Over millions of generations, this developed into the system we all know as anxiety. So you see, anxiety itself is not all bad. But when there's no immediate life or death threat, and your amygdala keeps telling your body that you're in danger, that's when anxiety becomes a problem. Your amygdala doesn't know the difference between getting eaten and public speaking or failing a test. Human society has only existed for a relatively short time. It's messy and complicated and confusing, and our amygdalae just haven't had time to catch up. So sometimes, when we're in uncomfortable situations, our brains misread the risk and overreact. Our hearts beat faster and we breathe heavily, pulling more oxygen into our bodies. The muscles in our arms and legs tense up and fill with blood. Our skin perspires to cool us down. This would all be great if we needed to fight or run, but instead, we just feel tense and sweaty. Sometimes our minds go blank and we feel like we can't move or talk. That would be great if we needed to hide. Instead, we just feel stuck. When things trigger our anxiety, sometimes we try to avoid them, like our ancestors avoiding a predator. But that can cause problems when those triggers are important parts of life, like going to school or meeting new people, things that won't just give up and go away. So how does knowing all this help? Well, it starts with remembering what's really going on. There's nothing physically wrong with you. It's just your amygdala trying to tell you it thinks you're in danger, even if it gets confused about how much danger you're really in. Understanding why we feel anxiety is an important step in learning to manage it.
All right. Thank you, Anxiety Canada, for that awesome video. So now we're going to talk a bit more about how to recognize anxiety in yourself and in others. So there are a variety of ways in which anxiety can manifest in our body, so physiologically, and also in our minds, cognitively. So we'll kind of just start and then go around the circle here. So starting with avoidance. Avoidance, that can be like avoidance of a specific person or people, avoidance of situations, or avoidance of certain things that might maybe trigger that anxiety. Secondly, sweating. Okay, so it's important to notice when your hands might get clammy or you're feeling hot or your armpits might get kind of sweaty. That could also be kind of a physiological indicator that, oh wait, maybe I'm experiencing some anxiety right now. Thirdly, stomach issues. I think this is a really important one to notice because there's a lot of causes for stomach issues, right? Like maybe you ate too much ice cream, or you might be sick, but really like that anxiety. Think about the butterflies you might get in your stomach when you're nervous about something. If you're constantly under that state of anxiety or stress, that can cause some more longitudinal stomach issues. So something to notice. Thirdly, panic attacks, the need for assurance, lack of patience. So if you might notice that your or maybe your child's foot is always tapping, or they're fidgety, or they have a hard time sitting still, that's something to notice as well. Next, procrastination. I know I personally struggle with that one sometimes. Experiencing trouble concentrating, or maybe constantly worrying. It could be about a little thing or about big things, or thinking that the world might not be safe, having that kind of overarching worry about safety in this world in which we live. Trouble breathing. So maybe someone might be experiencing a lot of quick, shallow breaths, or breathing and breathing, breathing, trying to get in more oxygen, but not feeling like you're getting enough. That's when that really deep, oxygen-filled, slow breathing is really, really helpful to alleviate some of that anxiety. Headaches, having rapid heartbeat, experiencing insomnia. So whether that's difficulty falling or difficulty staying asleep, or experiencing memory issues. So these are some, but definitely not all, but some of the symptoms that are important to notice in order to be able to recognize anxiety in yourself or others. So for us in our work, when we meet with students at the middle schools or the high schools, or just in our work in therapy or counseling, we start kind of initiating those services by going through a bunch of different questionnaires. And the purpose of that is to assess with the students or with their parents, to get the parents' feedback for different symptoms related to anxiety, related to depression, or other mental health related situations. And we definitely ask about all of these symptoms experienced on the screen. And another important question to consider that we ask students and parents, and that I think would be really valuable for parents, caregivers to consider, is we ask the students how often they might go to the doctor and the doctor says, oh, nothing's wrong. So these stomach issues that we talked about, or experiencing headaches or panic attacks, they might manifest from anxiety, but people might go to the doctor thinking that it might be a medical issue, and the doctor might say, there's nothing wrong with you. But that's really important, and we encourage you guys all to kind of think about this in the back of your head. Could these physiological symptoms be really related to anxiety? And another thing to know is all these symptoms, they're pretty common, right? And we experience, I bet, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but I bet that all of us experience some of these symptoms to some extent, right? But I encourage you to do some self-reflection. Which ones do you experience? Maybe more than others. To how often and to what level of intensity have you noticed these symptoms in your student or in a loved one? Go ahead and take a couple seconds to reflect on how anxiety might be manifesting. Okay. So now we're going to talk about some anxiety igniting thoughts. And we just had to add this cute little funny brain picture because you need a little humor in this heavy topic, right? So anxiety igniting thoughts have the potential to activate the amygdala. So I want you to think back to that video that we watched a couple slides back. It talked about the amygdala and our brain and what anxiety really looks like in our body. So kind of channel some of that knowledge as we're going through these anxiety igniting thoughts. So the amygdala could be the primary source of anxiety in people. These common anxiety igniting thoughts arise from the cortex as well. So as we talk about these thoughts, let's think back, like I said, to that lesson from a few minutes ago. So first, pessimistic thinking. The cortex helps interpret experiences and make predictions about what is likely to happen in the future. So while some people might tend to be optimistic, expecting the best, others tend to be pessimistic, expecting the worst. A pessimistic attitude can reduce one's willingness to try to change their own anxiety, since maybe a successful outcome is not expected. Okay. Secondly, worry. And this is a source of anxiety for most people. And it involves like images in our brain or thoughts or things like that. So the third source of anxiety igniting thoughts might be obsessive thinking. So the cortex can increase anxiety when it won't let go of an idea or behavior. So if you find that you're getting preoccupied with certain thoughts or obsessions or compulsions and are having trouble getting past them, then this might be a problem arising from the cortex. Perfectionism. I'm tempted to skip this one because I feel like I definitely experienced these perfectionistic thoughts, but we'll dive in nonetheless. So perfectionism is placing unrealistic high standards on yourself or on other people. And this is a way that really anxiety is increased. And these expectations ignite more anxiety within yourself and probably on other people as well, and really evoke some other strong emotions as well. Maybe think about anger or sadness, disappointment, whatever it might be. I think this is a really important one for me to be aware of, and perhaps for you as well. So number 5, catastrophizing. And this is the tendency to make our problems into catastrophes, right? So even small setbacks seem like a huge issue. For example, some catastrophic thinking that we might experience with students during this Zoom learning time, this Zoom school is, oh my gosh, I don't want to turn on my video. I don't want to turn on my volume. I don't want to unmute myself because what if I look funny, or what if I say something wrong and my classmates are going to laugh at me, and then I'm going to get nervous and I'm going to answer the question wrong and the teacher's going to give me a bad grade, and then I'm not going to be able to get into college I want to get into, and I'm just not going to get the career I want, and I'm going to be a failure, right? It's really easy to go down that rabbit hole, but that really doesn't do much for us. That doesn't benefit us very much. So that cortex interpretation could really increase anxiety. So number 6, guilt and shame. So these are emotions that come from the frontal and temporal lobes. And guilt is a feeling that one has behaved in an unacceptable way. And shame relates to feelings that others will see you in a negative way. And both are anxiety provoking. A way that I like to differentiate guilt and shame is guilt is I did something bad, whereas shame is I am bad. So that's kind of an important distinction to keep in mind. So number 7, right hemisphere-based thinking. This is the tendency to focus on negative information, so that could be both visual and auditory. And this tends to be the source of some pessimistic thinking, and one can use its imagination skills to create images and scenarios that can be frightening. And its focus is on the nonverbal aspects of our experiences. So before we transition to the next slide, let's just take a moment and look through this list. Think about which of these anxiety igniting thoughts you might experience the most. And maybe consider even which of these types of thoughts you might be modeling to your student, that you might be modeling to your child or children. And how that could be maybe igniting anxiety in yourself, and maybe even modeling that thought pattern to them as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Devin. So this slide just talks about how anxiety presents in teens. So as you can see here on the top, anxiety, we talked about it already, and anxiety is a normal reaction to stress, but sometimes what may seem like usual teen struggles can actually be a sign of more severe anxiety disorder. So as you can see here on the right side, it's the signs that your body gives you that maybe you're dealing with anxiety at the moment. And as you can see here in the list of this of this page, there's different things that you can, different ways that anxiety presents itself in teens. So emotional changes, feeling on edge, irritability. I mean, I encounter that a lot with teens. Social changes, they may be avoiding social interactions with usual friends or avoiding things that they used to like to do, isolating. Some physical changes like headaches we talked about, or stomach aches, migraines, pains that you can't explain, or maybe changes in eating habits. poor school performance, as well as sleep disturbance. So again, difficulty going to sleep or staying asleep. So basically some of these changes are normal and typical of adolescence. I mean, and I think even adults in general, I mean, we all go through certain things at different times, some changes within ourselves, especially now, again, bringing our attention back to the pandemic. You know, some of the things that we deal with on a regular basis might be exacerbated right now. Such sometimes, you know, I see a lot of people that may be having some sleep difficulties, or maybe they're eating a little too much, emotional eating with the pandemic. So again, those are things that are, you know, we need to be aware of as well. So, but if you, as a parent, you know your child or your caregiver, if you notice that the anxiety that is, however it is that it's presenting itself in the teen, if you notice that it's interfering with their daily activities or with their, you know, overall functioning, it's just important to stay alert. It's important to be supportive and proactive and taking steps to help support them. And you can be the one, you know, that helps your teen recognize these things within themselves and, you know, encourage them to stay open in about their struggles and come to you for support. So again, this is just, these are areas for us to also look at because, you know, we talked about physical, we talked about thoughts as well, but anxiety can present itself in all these ways as well.
Unmute myself here. All right. So, right, I feel like that's what some signs, some red flags to look out for. But I imagine that a lot of you are here to know what to do, right, as parents, because it can be a very, you know, it can cause a lot of anxiety not knowing as a parent how to respond to this. So we're really going to dive into the what to do part next month on the part 2 of anxiety. But we wanted to just at least address some of it so you can leave here today with some tips and tools. So first of all, having an ongoing conversation. So this is important because you want to model that it's okay to bring up. It doesn't always have to be the conversation about, you know, mental illness or anxiety or what's wrong, right? Like almost kind of making it a more casual conversation. And it kind of allows your teen permission that way to bring it up. And it doesn't have to be this big, heavy thing every time that you talk about it. And then within that, right, model calmness. We've been talking a lot about modeling, right? So you yourself, make sure to ground before you talk to your kid, meaning make sure that you're going at this conversation in a relaxed and composed way. And if you need to do some deep breathing beforehand and think about what your goals are for the conversation before, do that beforehand so that when you can kind of demonstrate to them that how to talk about something that's anxiety provoking, but in a calm way. And also not overwhelming them with your own anxiety maybe, which, you know, can add to their own anxiety as well. And then while talking to them, this, I think as adults and as parents, we tend to want to fix our teens' issues, right? Just do this differently, or have you tried this, or what about that? And while that is a very natural response, because we don't want our loved ones feeling this way, one of the most helpful things you can do is actually just kind of set that on the side and just alternate between validating them, empathizing with them, and reflecting back to them. So validating why they might feel anxious. Yeah, I would feel anxious too if I was in remote learning and I was going through a breakup and there's COVID and you lost your job, you know, whatever it is, I would absolutely feel just validating that cognitive piece, and then empathizing with the emotion. And remembering too that you can empathize with the emotion of anxiety without agreeing with why they're anxious. So even if you disagree or think that, why, I don't get why you're anxious about this, right? That can happen. You don't have to. Just connect to the emotion of wow, I can see you feel so anxious right now. That must be so hard to focus on school feeling that way. And then reflecting, you want to reflect back what you're hearing your teens say when they do disclose to you, especially if it's one of the first times that they're doing it for you. So what I heard you say was that blank, right? Or summarizing for them. Oh, wow, it sounds like you're really scared of what people might think. So just reflect back so that they can say, no, that's not it, or yes, that is. So you really are just on the same page and you can move forward as a team. The next point here is help your teens sit and lean into the anxiety. So while there is definitely a time and place for distracting and avoiding the anxiety, when you're in a safe environment, it's actually good sometimes to lean into the anxiety. And by that, I mean, pay attention to it. What does it feel like in your body as you're experiencing it? Does it shift? Is it hot? Is it cold? Like just really paying attention to the sensation of anxiety as it's occurring. Actually, it might initially increase anxiety, but over the long run, decreases anxiety. Some things I say to some of my clients are you have to feel it to heal it. Emotions are there for a reason, right? They're trying to send us a message. So we have to listen sometimes so that they'll quiet down and so that we can move on with our life. And then sharing about your own experience. If you feel comfortable and it's appropriate depending on the age of your teen or adolescent, sharing your own experience with anxiety and what you do to deal with it or how you've overcome dealing with anxiety in certain situations can be, again, that modeling piece, but also really help validate your teen in having some of these really strong negative emotions. Can help them kind of feel like they're on the same team as you and like you understand it, you get it. And then this last piece here on the top conversation is use people first language. So this is just a small shift in how we talk about mental illness, and it's a way to de-identify with mental health issues. So instead of saying, why are you anxious? Or you're so anxious, do people first in terms of, I see that you're experiencing anxiety, or my son is anxious versus my son experiences anxiety, right? So it kind of takes your child out of the anxiety, out of the emotion to kind of separate them so that there's not an over-identification with, I'm just an anxious person, that's just who I am, right? So that shift can empower them to kind of take control of their anxiety as opposed to be the anxiety. And that can actually do a lot. And then this next piece, the relaxation strategies and coping skills, we will be going into this again next month. But one thing we really wanted to highlight today is breathing and mindfulness and exercise and body movement. So for breathing and mindfulness, I think we mentioned this a little bit before, and remember the video, right? When you're experiencing anxiety, you're often in that fight, flight, or freeze mentality. You're keyed up, you're tense, your body is ready to run away from the stressor or fight the stressor or completely freeze, right? Isolate it. Don't possums freeze? I think I'm trying to think of an animal that freezes when they're anxious. Yeah. And so what breathing does is it signals to your body that you're okay and that you're safe, because when you're having rapid breaths, right, that's ready to tense up and punch something or run away, you're kind of tricking your body to saying everything's okay. So it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which relaxes you. And then with the exercise piece of it is kind of the other end. So if you're keyed up and tense, moving your body in any way can help release that tension and kind of circle in and finish this kind of the cycle, the stress response cycle. So going for a run or just walking around the block or even just stretching, just sitting there and stretching, any kind of movement is going to help those stress hormones of cortisol pump through your body and it will help with kind of the happy hormones of endorphins pumped through too. So those are kind of the some of the most relevant coping skills for anxiety that we wanted to talk about. And I think the next slide too, we have just a little infographic. You can find these online everywhere. Just search on Google and images. Just putting something like this on your fridge might be a helpful tool, especially when your student is feeling very anxious and we don't have that much access to our thinking brain when we're really, really anxious. Having a place that we can see it and be like, okay, I'm anxious. Let me go to this list and just put my finger on something and do that thing. You can come up with a list together, or you can just look at this, right? And one thing I wanted to add too, that's a really helpful coping skill, kind of going off what Devin was talking about, having those anxiety igniting thoughts. You can challenge those thoughts. And one kind of filter to think about your thoughts, or metacognition, is to help your teen think about their thoughts in a kind of a critical way, and in that noticing if the thoughts they're having about themselves or that are igniting the anxiety are true thoughts. Are they even true, right? Just because you have a thought a lot doesn't make that true. And even if it is a true thought, is it helpful? Does it help anything about the situation to be thinking that thought all the time, right? So true and helpful is a filter to look at your thoughts at. And also just realizing, right, like I'm saying to yourself, telling your kid, right, saying in your head, I'm noticing I'm having the thought that blank. That kind of separates, again, you from that thought. I'm not that thought. Again, with that separation of the anxiety, that separation of the thought. I'm noticing I'm having the thought that everyone's going to laugh at me. I'm noticing I'm having the thought that I'm not good enough. Whatever it is, it kind of separates it from us and makes us maybe feel a little less anxious. And so, this is a new resource, Behavioral Wellness. Santa Barbara Behavioral Wellness just came out with this. And this is a you can call this number, the teen line at the bottom there, 800-852 number, or your teens can text teen to 839-863. And this is a non-crisis line, but it's really great because your teen can call in 24/7 and just talk to a professional confidentially about anything that they want to talk about. It doesn't have to be COVID related, but it's just a good resource, especially for a teen who's very withdrawn and maybe feels like a lot of the teens I talk to say, I feel like a burden to my parents. I feel like a burden to my friends. I can't tell them that. So just a good number to have to share with them. Hey, just put it in your phone, so that they can have some professional confidentially to be there for them if needed, and to provide them with emergency resources if needed too.
Awesome. So good. Thank you, Jessica. So we are aware of the time. We see that we only have 7 minutes left, so we might kind of rush through these next few slides because we want to get to question and answer time. So maybe start thinking in the back of your head, do I have any questions? And then you can chat it to us and we can address those in a minute. But so we talked about a lot today, right? We talked a lot about anxiety and kind of talking about the difference between anxiety and stress and all that jazz. And we talked about some tips, but we wanted to give you like a little sneak peek, a little taster of what we're going to talk about next month, so we can try to hook you and get you back in with us next month. So we will talk about the different types of anxiety disorders. We'll kind of use our big old manual that we use for diagnoses and give you guys some education about the different types. We will talk about the difference between anxiety and panic attacks. We will talk about how anxiety presents in adults. We talked about how it presents in teens today, and we'll talk more about how it presents in adults next time. We will also provide concrete tools and tips on managing anxiety and give you more information on when to reach out for support. So like I said, look out on Parent Square emails, on the Facebook page, or however else you get your information. So you can be sure to mark that down on your calendar. And one thing we also did want to announce that these webinars that we have every month, we have one live webinar in English, and we also have one live webinar in Spanish. And this webinar that we're presenting, pretty much the same exact material, will be in Spanish tomorrow night at 7 p.m. So we really encourage you to spread the word. If you know anybody who could benefit from this anxiety lesson that we talked about, who speaks Spanish or might be able to take the information in Spanish, we recommend that you share this with them. And I will put in the chat box the Zoom information for the meeting tomorrow night at 7 p.m. So you can pass that along, or tell your friends to pass it along, or tell your kids to tell their friends, parents to attend. I was like, what? All right. Oh, you got it, Kara?
Yeah, sorry. Just some more resources in the community for support at FSA. As we mentioned, we're all school-based counselors that work for FSA. We also have counselors in-house at FSA for students, adults, seniors as well. So there's a lot of support at FSA. We also recommend the Mental Wellness Center has a youth mental health first aid training and virtual groups as well for teens and adults. And you may have noticed we did use some references from Anxiety Canada, which is a website that has a lot of great resources and tools specifically for anxiety. If you have questions or want more specific resources, Raquel has her email here. You can reach out to her with more specific individualized questions, and she can point you in the right direction as well. And of course, we have two lines available for emergencies. The access line is for any mental health emergencies, and that is a 24-hour, 7-day number. And then of course 911 for any emergencies as well.
So we talked about it a lot, and we just wanted to give you a couple more tidbits, some other resources that you could check out. If you have Netflix, this 20-minute Mind Explained Anxiety is a really good show. We recommend maybe you watch it, maybe you bring your kid or your family with you to watch it. It has some really, really good information about anxiety. And here's a couple more links. Maybe somebody else could put these links in the chat box so people can access them later. Just some more information. Cool. Thank you, Jessica. More information so you can look things up on your own time. The much awaited question and answer time. So if you have any questions or thoughts or anything, we would love to spend some time fielding those. So go ahead and if you haven't already, send in the chat box to one of us any questions that you might have, and we'd be happy to talk about it.
Maybe we can stop sharing so we can all see our beautiful faces. There we go. So usually when people stick around this late, they're either hoping someone else has a question or they have a question and they're not asking yet. So definitely encourage, we're happy to answer them. It doesn't even necessarily have to be about anxiety, just this is your time to ask whatever might be on your mind, something you've always wondered about, any resources, really anything you want.
Mm-hmm. I know this has to be through chat unless we can unmute everyone, right? Are we able to do that in case they have questions, or?
I feel like if we're able to unmute them, maybe let's do that because we have a small enough group where we could just call out. But for now, just type some questions at the bottom. Oh, and I just remembered we had that poll that we were going to maybe ask. I don't know if Kara.
I can launch the poll, and I can, since we do have a smaller group, if we want to, I'll launch the poll now and then.
Awesome.
So just go ahead and answer the poll questions on your screen.
Unmute if anyone has questions.
Thank you for sharing your responses, guys. Really helpful.
Oh, and it's fun because we can see live what people's answers are. I'm not going to answer it because I don't want to skew the results.
We can't, by the way, it is anonymous, so we don't know who's saying what, but we see the answers.
Wow.
And if you guys have any requests also about future webinars, we're absolutely taking requests about how to move forward. Like we said, next month will be Anxiety Part 2, but if there's anything you've ever wanted to ask about mental health, or a topic you want to learn more about, or just really how to use this time and space, we want this to be best served for you all. So let us know at all. We're very flexible and happy to meet that need.
Sorry, I took a screenshot.
Hi, ladies. This is Sonia Spencer. I have a quick question. Hi, Raquel.
Hi, Sonia.
Hi. So I didn't get a chance to join in on your first webinar. I'm wondering if, and I see that this one's being recorded, is it possible to get the recording from the first one?
Yes, Sonia. I'm actually going to repost it. We posted earlier in chat. I'm going to repost the link so you can see it. Oh, let me see. My mouse is not working, so can someone help me with that?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. I'm trying to find information.
It's the first one. Jessica posted. For some reason,
Is it the FSA Cares one?
Yes, because it's on the home page on the bottom right. It's right there. But also in that YouTube link. So if you can repost. For some reason, my mouse, I guess, stopped working.
Okay.
But thanks for the question, Sonia.
Here's the information as well on the bottom of this slide, I believe.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm trying to copy and paste it and I am failing, but I will get it. Give me 1 second.
If you can't, that's okay. I know Sonia. I can email it to her too. Don't worry about it.
I'll get it. My mouse is also being weird.
I don't know if it's going on.
How funny is that? Okay, here we go.
All right.
Would also love to hear if anybody has maybe you would love to know, like, is there a reason, is there something that comes up often with your team that made you show up today, right? Is there kind of a recurring theme? Maybe we can role play, right, between how to address that with them, or what's the conversation that keeps happening that you maybe get stuck in. Like, maybe we can help with that if you feel comfortable. We're happy to, any type of consultation here works.
And if you guys are able to still chat, feel free to send it in the chat box too, so it's more private.
Okay, there's one of them, and I will get the other.
Oh, thank you, Jessica. I see it. Awesome. So
Yes.
It's there, Sonia, in the chat. There's 2 ways. If you want to look at the first one, there's 2 ways to view the self-care webinar.
We also just want to give credit where credit is due. So I'm just going to flash up our references.
Yes.
Our references slide so you can see where we get our information from. So yeah, that's kind of some of the places that we got our information and based our webinar off of tonight. But we'll stick around for a couple more minutes. So if anybody else has any questions, but yeah, we just want to thank you all for being here. Yeah, I know it's late, so I know that there's plenty of other things you could be doing. So we're grateful that you are spending your Wednesday evening with us. And we hope that we can see you next month. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
And I'll stop recording too. So if anybody has questions that they want, maybe off the recording, I could do that. Or wait, maybe whoever started recording can stop.
I will stop the recording.